You put on a shirt this morning without thinking about it. You didn't consider it a survival decision. You didn't consider it at all. But the real answer to why you did that is far stranger than habit. Clothing feels like culture. It feels like choice. It is neither. Somewhere in your genetic code is a fossil record of the exact moment your ancestors stopped being naked. Not a bone, not a cave painting, a parasite. Here's how scientists found it. Head lice and body lice are nearly identical creatures, but they live completely different lives. Head lice cling to hair. Body lice cling to fabric. They can only survive in clothing seams, in the folds of fibers pressed against skin, which means body lice could not have existed before clothing existed. They needed something to live in first. So a geneticist named Mark Stoneking did something clever. He compared the DNA of head lice and body lice to see when they split into two separate species. Genetic mutations accumulate at a steady, measurable rate. Count the differences, and you get a clock. That clock pointed to roughly 170,000 years ago. That's it. That's the invention of clothing, hidden inside an insect's bloodline. A separate genetics team led by Ralph Kittler at the Max Planck Institute ran the same experiment independently, using a different population of lice. They landed on a similar window, somewhere between 100,000 and 200,000 years ago. Two unrelated studies, one unrelated conclusion. Your species got dressed roughly 170,000 years before the first city, before the first written word, before agriculture. Why then? What changed? You'd assume the obvious answer. It got cold. Simple. Except modern humans had already been walking around Africa, mostly hairless, for tens of thousands of years before that timestamp. If cold alone explained clothing, you'd expect it much earlier. Something else was happening. This is where an archaeologist named Ian Gilligan built a different theory. Gilligan studied clothing not as culture, but as thermal technology, and his research points to a specific trigger: Ice Age cycles. Around that period, the planet moved through a severe glacial phase. Africa, even equatorial Africa, cooled and dried substantially. Early humans who had shed their fur millions of years earlier to sweat efficiently and hunt through heat were suddenly facing temperatures their bodies were never built for. You lost your fur to survive the heat of the savanna. Then the world got cold, and you had nothing left to survive it with. Clothing wasn't decoration. It was a patch for a design flaw evolution never saw coming. Your ancestors weren't dressing up. They were engineering a second skin because their first one had already been optimized for a different problem. And once that second skin existed, something unexpected happened to the human brain. Think about what clothing actually requires. You have to plan for weather that hasn't arrived yet. You have to prepare an animal hide today for a storm that might come next week. That is not instinct. That is forecasting. Some researchers argue the cognitive leap required to consistently produce clothing overlaps with the same abstract, future-oriented thinking behind early symbolic behavior, like ochre use and personal ornamentation, both appearing around a similar window. In other words, the same mind that learned to dress for tomorrow may be the same mind that started asking bigger questions about tomorrow altogether. There's physical evidence backing this up too. Archaeologists have found bone awls, thin-pointed tools used for piercing hide, alongside cut marks on fox and wolf bones suggesting animals were skinned for their pelts, not their meat. Someone was building something warm, one hide at a time. Here's an unexpected twist involving a different species of human entirely. Neanderthals lived through the same ice ages and were stockier, more cold-adapted physically. Yet the evidence suggests they largely wore simple wraps, not the tailored garments modern humans eventually developed. Modern humans, despite being the less naturally cold-adapted species, may have out-engineered their biology entirely. You didn't out-survive the Ice Age because your body was built for it. You out-survived it because your mind was. Once clothing existed as a technology, it stopped being just a technology. Give this pattern-obsessed species a tool, and within a few generations, it becomes a symbol. Gilligan's later work found something counterintuitive. Across dozens of cultures worldwide, clothing intended to conceal the body correlates more strongly with cold climates than with any moral code. Warmer regions historically show far more variation in what gets covered, which flips a common assumption on its head. You might think humans covered their bodies primarily out of modesty, and warmth was secondary. The evidence points the other direction. Warmth came first, meaning came after. Your ancestors needed insulation. Somewhere down the line, insulation became identity. A wrap of animal hide became a marker of rank. A color became a marker of ritual. None of that was in the original blueprint. It got added later, by minds that couldn't leave a useful object alone without turning it into a story. It's worth pausing on how fragile this chain of survival actually was. A population of hairless, sweat-cooled primates, adapted for heat, suddenly trapped in a colder world with nothing but their own ingenuity standing between them and extinction. No fur to regrow in a single generation. Just hands, and a mind capable of imagining a garment before it existed. Every human alive today descends from the branch that solved the problem in time. And the solving didn't stop at survival. Once bodies were reliably warm, humans had spare attention to spend elsewhere on things that had nothing to do with staying alive. Decoration, status, storytelling through fabric and color. Think about your own closet right now. Almost nothing in it exists purely for temperature regulation anymore. You have clothes for status, clothes for belonging, clothes that signal wealth, rebellion, romance. You have clothes you've never worn outside, bought for a version of yourself you imagined but haven't become yet. That's forecasting again, still running quietly every time you stand in front of a mirror deciding who you want to look like today. There's a reason getting dressed can feel emotionally loaded, even when it shouldn't. A bad outfit can wreck your confidence for hours. A good one can change how you carry yourself into a room. You're not being shallow. You're running an ancient piece of software, one that still treats clothing as a signal of preparedness, status, belonging to the group that survives. Even fashion cycles echo something older than trend forecasting. Clothing changes fastest in societies with the most social mobility, places where what you wear can shift how others treat you, how far you can rise. That's not a modern invention. It's the oldest use of clothing there is, just wearing a new outfit. So the next time you get dressed, notice what's actually happening. You are not just covering skin. You are running a 170,000-year-old survival algorithm dressed up, quite literally, as a personal choice. And that pattern never stopped. It just got more elaborate, generation after generation, until it became the enormous, tangled system of meaning you live inside right now without ever noticing it. Tonight, when you pick something out of your closet without a second thought, you won't feel like you're making a survival decision, but somewhere underneath the fabric, your ancestors already made it for you.